The death of the Hulk happened outside of the Hulk book. It was indicative of the problem with some of Marvel's big events, that characters were put into the hands of writers as pieces on a game board. They were to be used to allow the plot to unfold. Bruce Banner and Clint Barton, many felt both behaved out of character so that they could serve the needs of the story. I'm reminded of Nicholas Meyer saying in response to killing Spock, well, that you couldn't do it? Sure you could do it. It just had to feel like it was the natural result of the character arc. Bruce Banner's death came out of nowhere. Clint Barton murdering a man came out of nowhere. Shock is powerful, but shock easily leads to disappointment when it fades. This death came from nowhere. No culmination of a journey, no motivation for why Banner would suddenly decide to arrange his own execution now of all times. Yes, deaths are rarely permanent in comics, and despite having another Hulk running around, expecting Bruce Banner to be permanently killed was unlikely. But what happened showed that he was a tool in the hands of a writer who saw him as nothing more than that. But the return of the Hulk from the dead, that, a tool for the story it occurred in, was from the first moment saying, this is not a new beginning because he's back from the dead. It's a new beginning because it is the first step to address an entirely unexplored aspect of the character. The Hulk died while showing Hawkeye at his worst, and returned showing Wonder Man at his best. Perhaps that's all you need to know to observe where we go from here in the first issue of Immortal Hulk. Every issue starts with a quote, so with the one about man being worse than he likes to think, the implication of the phrase about two people in your mirror is that one is the reflection that you want to see, and the other the one that you refuse to see. That second one is the one who does bad things, but you ignore because you feel they're not. That probably applies to this guy who needs money to pay off some thugs, and thus has no choice, he feels, but to rob this gas station. But in the process, he panics, shoots a girl, and then a guy outraged by that. Unfortunately for him, that guy is Bruce Banner. Fortunately, though, the shot is fatal. But unfortunately again, in the case of the Immortal Hulk, death is just an inconvenience. The robber, however, no longer in a moment of panicking and reacting, executes the cashier. That is undeniable, cold-blooded murder for $200. Investigating this is a recurring character throughout the series, a journalist that Ewing names after the reporter from the Bill Bixby TV show, McGee. But this is just to establish the guy who robbed the gas station is who we mostly follow, who only managed to cover the interest on the money the thugs loaned him in order to cover his bills. He's unemployed. That's a very sad situation to be in, believe me. But it's not as bad as being murdered. A fact few complain about in person, but the Hulk is the exception that proves the rule. He tracks the murderer to the thugs' hideout, kicks the crap out of them, and is all alone with the murderer now, and tells the guy the name of the 12-year-old girl that he killed today, to steal $200. The Hulk may superficially look like the famous green one called savage or childlike depending on the situation, but his words are almost philosophical, even the part when he says he can smell liars. And because this guy's been lying to himself, he was able to follow him here, and is unmoved by the guy's excuses and attempts at recompense. Instead, the Hulk breaks just about every bone in his body, probably cripples him for life, and leaves him with a murder weapon to be found. The book ends with Bruce Banner saying the same thing the murderer had, about not being a bad person. He phrases it as a question, though, asking it of the one who's looking back in his mirror. To go back to what I said about the various Hulks deriving from Bruce Banner, Part of the strain between him and the Joe Fixit and Savage Hulk personas is that, as established, they appeared to evolve from his own personality. Joe is what happens if Banner no longer cares what anyone thinks of him. Joe is comfortable with being what he is. The Savage Hulk is going still further, so that the ability to think beyond immediacy is gone. He's id. In other words, when looking at either of them, Banner is looking at an ugly version of himself. But the very original Hulk, well, as I said way back, this being is part of his human brain. It is from his psyche and all of that. The connection is not the same. This Hulk is not an evolved or devolved version of Banner. It's a personality that emerged from the depths of his psyche. Perhaps the part that was unwilling to accept death by Gamma Blast and first pulled Bruce back from the brink. Yet what we might see is that something has happened here. The connection between the Hulk and Banner changed the moment that Wonder Man brought up what the Challenger did by resurrecting him, taking away what Banner had wanted, which was the peace of death. After that, the idea of it bothered the Hulk as well, suggesting that the connection between these two has evolved now. It should be noted that despite what happened, despite tearing through an entire biker gang, the Hulk didn't kill one single person. Someone who had spoken soon after his resurrection about seeing all the humans wiped out wouldn't take the life of a criminal firing a shotgun into his face. Not to mention, why would that Hulk care about that girl being killed when he had been fine with her being killed by the Challenger and the annihilation of human life? Something has happened that has altered the dynamic here. The antagonistic relationship between the Hulk and Banner has actually given way to something opposite. Perhaps it is the realization that they can't stay dead. Perhaps it's the realization that Banner has been so ground down by the Hulk that he wishes he could stay dead, but this Hulk seems to have changed now as a consequence. Perhaps Banner is exerting enough on this persona to change him, or perhaps it has awakened in this Hulk a realization, like someone who has realized this time they've finally gone too far. Now they have to make up for the harm that they've done. Issue 2 now follows Banner as he is again on the run, trying to survive the travails of being a homeless broke drifter. But while in the past Banner did so while discussing curing himself of being the Hulk, this time is very different. He thinks about using the power inside him, trying to bring justice to the world and atone for his sins. To go back to what I was just saying, it's like the same way this Hulk changed its attitude and behavior towards Banner. Banner is doing the same towards the Hulk. Right now he's interested in these local deaths that the Hulk mentally pushes him towards. He learns of what one bar patron calls a cycle of grief, that someone dies, someone close to them gets sick and dies, someone close to that person gets sick and dies. It all started with a kid named Fry, whose father made some pioneering breakthrough in radiation treatment. That seems to be the direction to go. Leading him to the grave makes Banner realize that the reason for the sickness is because there's a source of gamma radiation buried in Fry's grave, and that's why the grief acts this way. People coming to visit their dead loved ones are being bombarded with it. After calling for someone to deal with it, people will come running if Bruce Banner calls up to say he's worried about something. He heads to the cave that is another source of gamma rays. And Fry's father, the doctor, is in there. Very radioactive. And strangles Banner. But at night. So all killing Banner does is brings out the Hulk. The Hulk wants to know what's his deal, so the not-so-good doctor said that after his wife passed, he feared death, and so studied gamma radiation to gain the Hulk's seeming immortality. It seemed to work. So he gave some to his kid. Only it didn't go down so well. He collapsed while talking about a green door and the one below. Well, Fry died, and no effort was made to prevent his body from shedding gamma rays, so people got sick and died. And his father hid in this cave and killed anyone who showed up in order to protect his secret. The Hulk thus gives him what he wants: to live. He does so by ripping off the guy's arms and legs, leaving him at the bottom of a collapsed shaft, with no hope of ever getting out or of dying. Ever. One thing about a character with a long enough history is having various writers interpret them in ways that can complicate things. One thing that happened to Bruce Banner in a period of his life was he was free from the Hulk and was able to use his genius to make gadgets. There's nothing to fault this period over. If he's almost as smart as Reed Richards, why not? And if he only has brains and not brawn, then he should use them. Of course, now that Banner is back to wandering, the elephant in the room is why he's not making more gadgets. Ewing addresses this by going back to the means that he was killed, a special arrow shot into his brain. Banner feels he's not smart enough to do those things anymore, and that it's possible that, in fact, the Hulk running things now might be smarter than him. Not on science, as both note. Banner is still a fully capable nuclear physicist, and the Hulk doesn't go in for science. But what he also doesn't go in for are fathers who hurt their sons, and the punishment is to let him have what he wants forever. Issue 3 brings back two long-forgotten characters, part of a group the leader created during the Joe Fixit era. In fact, the detonation of the Gamma Bomb is what allowed the Hulk to be presumed dead and make a life using the alias of Joe Fixit. Among the Gamma mutates that emerged after the bomb went off was Hotshot and Jailbait. I looked that second one up to verify it, which wasn't easy because I didn't want Marvel Jailbait getting me flagged by the NSA or something. The two characters hadn't made an appearance in 20 years, as it was just a few issues before their creator, Peter David, exited the Hulk's book. Well, Ewing puts them to interesting use. Particularly fascinating is this Rashomon approach, combined with each perspective being drawn by a different artist. The cop reports showing up where a hoodlum had an old woman and priest hostage in a church. The hoodlum shoots the gun from the cop's hand. The bartender reports Bruce Banner showing up in his bar, looking like a junkie who wanted to use the bathroom as a place to shoot up. But seeing the hostage situation on the news prompts Bruce to grab a knife and run out. The old lady, she says Hotshot looked like James Dean and wanted the priest to give his girl the last rites. To save her immortal soul, he says. As for the priest, he remembers Hotshot blathering about being possessed by the devil and the deep below place. And a green door. Well, that's when the Hulk shows up, scaring the priest, upsetting the old lady with the way he menaced Hotshot, but pleasing the cops who, in a rare twist, saw him as the hero, a founding Avenger after all. The Hulk broke Hotshot's hands, but that doesn't stop his power, so he burns a hole through the Hulk's chest. This does nothing, it just heals up again. Hotshot calls the Hulk the Devil, who likes the name, but in the end Hotshot is locked up. The Hulk leaves, and they go to the motel to find Jailbait tied to a chair, head on the wrong way, smiling, dead, and with the words, "Green Door" painted on the wall. Hotshot said he only tied her up, and for her own good. She was out of control. Then he hanged himself in his cell somehow. As for the bartender, he was taught to be a little friendlier next time. And McGee, the reporter, she sees a pattern emerging, but she wants to talk to the Hulk. She gets someone kind of close, a phone call from Walter Lankowski, a.k.a. the Sasquatch, who has his alter ego in a reflection, suggesting something might just be up with him, too. Issue 3 continues to bring back what 2 did, the Green Door, the Below Place. What it now adds, though, is someone convinced that there's some kind of possession taking place as well. The Rashomon approach to the story works well, and the Hulk's decision to destroy the bartender's car over how he treated Banner shows the degree to which the Hulk is now protecting him, even punishing those who mistreat Banner. A far cry from where he used to be. Issue 4 has Lankowski meet with McGee in South Dakota, but quickly moves into Minnesota when there's a possible Hulk sighting. On the way, he explains about his history with Bruce Banner, a resentment that the jock was trying to muscle in on his turf. But that animosity was rare. Mostly they got along well, and Lankowski had to admit He was a football player who dabbled in science, not a scientist who could play football. But upon finding out Bruce was the Hulk, well, one thing led to another, and Lankowski had turned himself into Sasquatch, a superhero in Canada's Alpha Flight. The rationale had been that Lankowski was twice as strong as Bruce, ergo, his form would be stronger than the Hulk. And because he lacked the psychological issues of Bruce and was pretty laid back, he'd be in control. He could protect Canada from the Hulk should he ever cross the border. Except things didn't go quite as planned. Lankowski wound up opening a doorway and was possessed by a malevolent being named Tanarak. That did actually happen in Alpha Flight, if you're wondering, forcing Snowbird to kill him and leading to various soul shenanigans for Lankowski, including an attempt to take over the Hulk's seemingly mindless body at one point. Well, they arrived at the site of the Hulk's latest incident, and McGee wants to check bars the way that Banner does. During questioning of the most Fargo-voiced woman ever, two regulars are inexplicably enraged with each other. Lankowski tries to break it up, but the one behind him pulls out a Bowie knife, and faster than you can say, "Oh, cripes, Marge, it looks to be a stabbing," Lankowski gets it in the back and drops dead. What surprises McGee, beyond the fact that he was just murdered for no reason, of course, was that Lankowski didn't change like he should have. After giving a statement to the police, Banner stops by to talk to her, saying that Lankowski's radiation signature is just like his own, and thus the Hulk can follow it. But because they're the same, it means that he's on the same routine that Banner is now. The classic original way of changing, not with anger, not with a gamma machine, but by the sun going down. And sure enough, even after being pronounced dead, he changes and gets up and says in response to God above that it's the reverse. Issue 5, our final one this time, heads to before with Alpha Flight, a very different one from the old days. For one thing, they're led by Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. For another, they're on a space station. She's concerned that he seems to be struggling with controlling himself, and Puck, a longtime veteran of Alpha Flight, is concerned that he's seen so little of the man and so much of the beast. To make the point clear that he's in control, Lankowski changes back to human, except the Sasquatch is in his mirror, wanting to come out. Likewise, the Hulk is in Banner's reflection in the hospital, because they both know what's happened. But Banner wants to try his way this time, confronting Sasquatch in the aftermath of his slaughter of the surgical staff. Sasquatch instead slices Banner's throat open, saying he wants to talk to the real him. Well, the Hulk does indeed come out, but says that when Banner gets hurt, he takes it personally. And he knows this isn't Lankowski, who, in his words, is a smug little know-it-all, but not a murderer. No, Hulk figures Lankowski needed to feel wanted, and only ever felt that way for his physicality and not his mind, which led him to stay Sasquatch too long and allow the same thing that got into Jailbait to get into him. Well, what's inside of him is Bruce Banner's father, Brian. Yep. Even the Hulk is gobsmacked at that one. An imitation? Well, if so, it's a very convincing one, as he hits the Hulk physically and verbally, like the old man had, repeating what he'd always called Bruce from the beginning. Monster. The Hulk denies it, of course, but as the creep notes, he can smell lies and see ghosts. It sure seems like the evidence is on Brian's side. Even the Hulk, this Hulk, is cowed. But he doesn't like that feeling, so he gets enraged. So much so that someone else seems to be pushing against the walls here. Someone else green and angry, but not big on words. Lashing out in the Hulk's own rage as he smashes the beast thing. The creatures say it needs a personality to appear in our world, a soul to wear as a mask. Right before slashing the Hulk. A security guard tries to taser it and gets duly rewarded, but the Hulk takes advantage of the distraction, grabs it, and drains the gamma away, returning him to Lankowski. As for the Hulk and McGee, he gets her to spill why she's here, the point we'd seen earlier in a flashback, of when she was 15 and the Hulk trashed their neighborhood. And her question, after seeing what the Hulk did, seeing his rampage destroy all her father has, is only, how can I become like you? But a far more important question is what happened to Brian Banner, or whatever that was. And the answer is, he's now inside the Hulk. What does that mean? The book begins a new arc, which we'll take a look at as we continue the journey of the Immortal Hulk.